What's it like to preach to people?
I think a quiet secret is that nobody likes it. Nobody really likes it, but it's such an ingrained part of the culture. It's something that we're taught that we have to do. We're taught that the main way we show we love people is by preaching to them. So that's really a huge part of who you are as one of Jehovah's Witnesses.
Hello and welcome back to this channel. My name is Frida Wiesel, and on this channel I explore topics that interest me as a Jewish American YouTuber from a Hasidic background with a great love of understanding human nature and sociology. I do video essays as well as interviews. When I was a Hasidic kid in the village of Kiryas Joel, there were almost only Hasidic Jews in my world. Our community, Kiryas Joel, was pretty much entirely Hasidic Jewish. Yet, we also neighbored literally in the back of my childhood home, something we called the church. It turned out, this is something I learned as an adult, that there actually wasn't a church in the back of our house. It was a Jehovah's Witness assembly hall. I've always been fascinated by unique cultures, and I found that there are often vast similarities as well as vast differences between them. I'm really interested in understanding them, especially when it comes to American religious subcultures like the Amish, which I've covered in several interviews, or Jehovah's Witness, which was right in my childhood backyard. I have interviewed Miriam Vidal, who herself attended the assembly hall behind my home. And today I will speak to Jeff Parnell, who was born in the faith and later left it. I'm looking forward to hearing his story. Before we dive in, I want to thank all channel members who are members for $4.99 a month and help make this time-consuming and labor-intensive work possible. Thank you to all of you. And thank you, Jeff, and hello.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you over there?
Good. Are you nervous about telling your story on a podcast?
No, I'm more worried about my cat in the other room.
Oh, okay. Cats are welcome on
Well,
my podcast.
okay.
Yeah. Cats can steal the thunder of the guest.
I have to let her in at some point. Yeah.
Yeah, that's totally fine. That's totally fine. What's her name?
Sheila.
Sheila, sweet. So, Jeff, you want to start us from the beginning, where you were born and which year?
So I was born in Buffalo, New York,
Oh,
way back in 1980.
got it. We're getting old. I'm 85.
Yeah. Okay.
So your parents were Jehovah's Witness?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a backstory. Both of my parents were Jehovah's Witnesses when I was born. They learned it initially, I believe, through my father's mother. So if you stretch it out far
Your
enough, I'd be third
grandmother.
generation, but that's the world I was born in.
Got it. So what was the backstory? Your grandmother chose to join the faith?
So yeah, I believe she just took it. They're known for going door to door. As I understand it, she learned with people that were preaching door to door. She accepted a study. Ended up getting baptized as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and then later on, she introduced my father to it, which I would say that's pretty interesting because my father kind of learned it from two sides. He learned it mainly from my grandmother talking to him, but also at some point, my mother ended up hearing somebody from door to door as well. So she ended up getting a study as well. As I understand it, it's a bit of a story. My mother died when I was very young, so a lot of the story is pretty old to
Oh.
me. But as I understand it, my mother took a study. My dad took to it much more than she did. But in the end, they ended up getting baptized together.
So they were already together, not in the faith, and
Correct.
then they got turned on it.
Correct.
Do you think your grandmother being enthusiastic about this new faith is what made your mother more open to it?
Maybe it definitely made my dad more open to it. My mother, I really don't know. I don't
It's an
know.
enormous coincidence that both your mother and your grandmother separately accepted a study, which I'm guessing is
Yeah.
the language when you let someone in when you're approached at your door.
Yeah, that's right.
So, when you piece together the story of your parents joining this faith, who did you learn it from?
Um, I would have learned it primarily from my dad. My mother, she was terminally ill when we were 3 years old. I'm a twin brother.
Oh,
So she
really?
was terminally ill and then ended up dying when we were 5. So I grew
I
up with not very memories of her. She was in the hospital for most of the memories I would have had of her. So
ah.
everything I've would have learned through the faith came pretty much from my father.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Jeff. That's very sad. That sounds very hard to lose a mother at such a young age.
Yeah, what's interesting as you say that is to me, it wasn't something that necessarily caused a lot of sorrow. I think children can be pretty resilient. So I grew up with an acceptance of it. But looking back on my story, it was very formative to how I saw the world, how I navigated it, and just really what was around me.
How so?
Um, well, my father, he grew up, was very rough. I didn't know much of his upbringing until later, but he had a very difficult upbringing. And my father, I didn't start thinking about this till later, but what happened with my father was he was in his probably late 20s, early 30s with twin boys and a wife who was terminally ill and then ends up being widowed, would have been in his early 30s. So he never recovered from that. And I think as I grew up, that really shaped who he was and how he
Hmm.
saw the faith and how he felt about it. And that had an influence of how I saw it, and also it had an influence of me staying in for a very long time, even though at the time I didn't realize it.
Mm. Who raised you?
It would have been my father. He remarried when we were 10 years old. And then there was also a woman in the congregation that was a couple doors down from us, who helped raise us as well. So it would
In
have been my
Buffalo?
father, my stepmother in Buffalo, yes.
What's it like in Buffalo? Besides
It's
for a
cold and wet.
snow and cold. Besides for the weather. Like suburban?
It's cold.
Is that what it's like?
So, man, it's interesting that you asked that. It's basically, I describe it as just a typical Rust Belt city. When I was growing up, all the industry had left. It was just, there really wasn't anything there. The food was good, the local sports team. Where I lived was kind of on the edge of the city, which was a decent neighborhood. But where I went to school was in the it was in the ghetto. It was in a very, very rough neighborhood. So interesting with me growing up, um, I'm myself am biracial. My mother was white. I grew up living in a white neighborhood, somewhat suburban, but then I went to school, as you could say, on the other side of the tracks, which was very, very rough. So daily, I would kind of see two different worlds. I wouldn't quite fit in either one of them, but I really got to see it with my own eyes and experiences.
Interesting. So, what was your father's background?
My father grew up in the Jim Crow South, just as civil rights were coming up. He ended up joining the military and somehow ended up in Buffalo. My mother was a native of the area, so they met while he was living there. So they
Ah,
met, ended up together, and
wow.
we came along.
How, how did they manage to have twins? Are you fraternal twins?
Fraternal, yeah. There's only one me.
What does that mean?
The identical twins, they look alike.
Ah, the identical twins is like, I see. Does your brother look like you?
We don't look anything alike.
Really? Are you close though? Can I
Yeah.
ask?
So can I let my cat in real quick? Just one moment.
Yeah. All right. Oh, there she is.
Yeah.
Hello, Sheila, right?
Yes.
Ah, sweet. Oh, I love that. Can you answer again about your
Yeah.
brother?
So yeah, my brother and I, we don't have a relationship at present, and that's been about 20 years right now. And the easiest way to say it is the religion pretty much had everything to do with us not having a relationship.
Wow. Let's talk more about that when we talk about your
Oh yeah,
decision to not be in the faith. Your dad being bereaved as a young man. Is your dad still around?
he still is. Yeah,
Got it. Do you have a relationship with him?
we do. I live in a different part of the country now, so we don't communicate a lot, but when we do, it's good.
What about your stepmom?
I actually speak to her more. They're together. They're still together.
Are they in the faith?
They still are very much.
I see. So, how did your dad understand the loss of his young wife in terms of faith? Do you know?
Yeah. So Jehovah's Witnesses, a central part of the beliefs is a belief in paradise, where we'll have an opportunity to see people we've lost in paradise. So my entire belief system was centered around that, and then as well as my dad. So the faith that we grew up with, that he learned, was pretty much central to the hope that one day we'll see her again.
I see. So that helped him cope.
Yeah.
I see. So, when you were a child, was your father missionizing?
Oh, so okay. So what we call it. The word we call that, the proselytizing amongst Jehovah's Witnesses, is called preaching.
Oh, okay, got
And
it.
Jehovah's Witnesses preach. Part of being one of Jehovah's Witnesses is that you are going to preach to people. So that's something that he's done my entire life. That's something I did the entire time I was in it as well.
Really?
Yeah.
What's it like to preach to people?
Um, I I think a quiet secret is that nobody likes it.
Nobody likes
Um,
doing the
it,
preaching.
Nobody really likes it, but it's such an ingrained part of the culture. It's something that we're taught that we have to do. It's something it's we're taught that the main way we show we love people is by preaching to them. So that's really a huge part of who you are as one of Jehovah's Witnesses. But at the same time, especially for myself, and I think for a lot of other people, but especially for me personally, is there was this thing where it's like, yeah, okay, so I'm here to show people that I love them, but also at the same time, I'm expected to go to a complete stranger's door and tell them that they're wrong and I'm right. So there's a real contrast, a real conflict of holding those beliefs, which I think is very common. Also, it's you're really putting yourself out there. You're going to talk to a stranger. You don't know what kind of response you'll get. Oftentimes, it's negative if people decide to engage with you anyways. So it's
Wow.
very hard. It's very hard. I do think it's one of those things where if you're in a group, when you do the things that are really, really, really hard, that are difficult, that's what draws you closer to the faith or the beliefs that you have in that group. And I think
Mm.
preaching plays a huge role in that.
Well, that's interesting. It creates a community cohesion because here are all the people that struggle with this very, very difficult burden of approaching strangers and essentially trying to sell them on a faith, which to me,
Yeah.
as someone who hates sales, it sounds absolutely so hard, so hard. Can you tell me stories from your preaching experiences?
Oh man, quite a few. There was one time I was preaching in a more rural area, and the neighbor put his Saint Bernard dog on us. That wasn't very fun.
Whoa. Were
Um,
you in like a neighborhood of a lot of private houses or condos?
so I've moved around quite a bit. So I was in various different congregations, very different types of preaching territories in various different settings. So growing up, it was much more urban, almost suburban. When I moved to Colorado, it was much the same, a bit more suburban. Uh,
Maybe set the scene. You were talking about being on the other side of the tracks. What kind of people would you try to missionize to, like, help us visualize the setting or
so the
preach to? I'm
people I,
sorry.
that's fine. The people I preached to primarily growing up would have been just working class people, somewhat suburban, not fully suburban, but kind of just like a typical medium sized town, working class, single family homes. So just regular working class people. The neighborhood I grew up in was, there were a lot of Catholics, a lot of just non religious people. That's what I grew up with. It was somewhat similar when I moved to Colorado. It was much more suburban. So they were just middle class people, typically more white collar from what I was used to. But then I ended up getting into foreign language as well. So for a while, I ended up joining a French speaking group. They were primarily West African. Then when I moved to Brooklyn, I ended up getting into a Haitian Creole congregation. So they were all Haitian.
They also spoke
That was
French.
quite, they did speak French. In the time I was there, they started kind of switching over to Haitian Creole where the meetings were then in Haitian Creole. The literature we got was Haitian Creole. They could speak French, but just culturally, people were more comfortable speaking that. So that's kind of what they started getting into more. But the people I spoke to in Brooklyn mostly were Haitian.
Who's the most difficult to preach to? What's the demographic?
I wouldn't say anybody was particularly easy.
I see.
The most difficult would be people that had a more comfortable lifestyle.
Hmm.
People that seem to have a nicer house, seem to have nicer cars, a lot more what looked like to be stability.
Yeah.
People that had steady careers. What's interesting is we were always taught, and it feels really awkward saying this, but it's being very honest as well, is that we would always look for people that had something difficult in their life, or
Yeah.
somebody that may have recently experienced some sort of trauma,
Mm.
because those would be the people that are looking for hope. So in our minds, okay, well this is hope. Let's give you some hope. So if you were going to be in a more impoverished neighborhood, those were people that may have had less, that may have experienced more difficulty. So they were more open to listening to what we had to say. But when the more affluence you saw, the more difficult it was to speak to.
Interesting. Were there people who were totally shut down to hearing your message, but were still friendly?
We would get that often, very, very often. It was very hard, especially for me, pretty much my entire time through, because we're taught the idea of where, okay, if somebody listens, then it's worth going back. But to
Uh-huh.
me, it's like, okay, I can clearly see that this person doesn't have interest. I can clearly see this person, they're being polite, but there's no real need to engage. So in my mind, maybe I should just respect them.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm taught, okay, maybe you should keep going back. But yeah, we would get quite a few people that weren't interested, but would still be polite.
So, can you explain what a preaching expedition would look like?
Wow. So we would get our assigned territory for the congregation from a more centralized branch. So it's like a top-down model, if you will. Each territory, each specific little, I guess, parcel, if you will, may be set up of maybe one or two or three blocks. So when we're meeting, say Saturday morning, we're prepared, we're ready to go. So the person leading the group may say, okay, here's the specific parcel you'll work, which might be 2 blocks. Then there might be another group, so you're going to work this block next over from them. It was very organized. On any specific time we would meet for service, we would go out knowing where we were going to go, how big it was. We would know there were some people who would want to call back on people that would invite us to come back, where you would know exactly where you're going to go in a very specific area, how you're going to work one door to the next. And it might be like a group of maybe 4 people, maybe 6 people on a block. The idea was you don't want too many people in one central location because it kind of brings too much attention. But at the same
Mhm.
time, you want enough people where they can kind of see each other and where it can get done in an efficient manner.
But you're actually hitting doors by yourself, just you.
Very rarely, almost always, it would be 2 people.
Who would you be paired with?
You never know. There would be friends or just various people within the congregation. We all pretty much knew each other. Or if you really didn't know somebody, you might pair up with them and kind of get to know them between working doors.
Did you form meaningful relationships with people that you went through this experience with?
Man, that's a very, very good question. So if you're in the group, it's a very insular group. The relationships you build are conditional.
Mm.
So as long as you're in the group, as long as all of you believe something, you can have a very good relationship. But if you decide to leave, like that relationship you thought you had forever will disappear
Yeah.
immediately. So I would say while I was in the group, I did make some very close friends. I made some people I was very close to, but there are many people, if not most, that know that if I left, they wouldn't speak to me again.
So let's go back to talking about this door situation, which sounds really hard to me. I don't mean to bring my own judgment, but I'm trying to better
Oh no, that's
understand.
fine.
How old were you when you started to do it?
The first time I started knocking on doors and engaging with people, I might have been like 7 or 8.
Really?
Yeah, that's what you do. You would go with an adult, like you might have your little pamphlet in your hand or your little magazine. You might knock on the door. You know, somebody might answer because you're a child. And if you offer it, like you're not going to turn a child down.
So what do you say as a child?
You might just say, "Hi, I have something for you to read. Would you take it?" Just something simple. By the time you get to your teens and high school years, you're going to have a pretty good idea of what it means to be somebody who preaches. So at that age is where you're expected to engage on your own terms.
What was your style?
So for me, I really like people. I care about people. So to me, I wouldn't go there necessarily with the first idea of just trying to get you to go to the Kingdom Hall. But if I were to approach somebody, I would ask a sincere question, like, okay, if there's like a current event going on, oh, do you see what's going on in the world? What do you think about that? Okay, well, here's the scripture. Let me share this with you. I was never necessarily that quick to go dive right into the Bible. It's like, okay, well, what do you think? Oh, why do you feel that way? Oh, that's interesting. Let me take a minute to hear what you have to say. But in the end, there was always the expectation that everything you were going to do, you were either going to give them some of our literature, the Jehovah's Witness literature, or you're going to read a Bible verse to them.
I see. Where do you learn all of these skills? Do you actually learn them at the Kingdom Hall?
Yeah. So when I was growing up, there would be 3 meetings a week. So one of the meetings was specifically focused on how to preach to people. So things we would discuss, ways to approach people, how to handle conversation stoppers.
What are conversation stoppers?
So, okay, I might say, hey, good morning, how are you? You're like, oh, I'm fine. Well, I'm Jewish. That's a conversation stopper.
I see.
Okay, so how
Okay.
do I respond to somebody? Or if somebody says, I'm not interested, well, how would you? It was very much like a sales pitch.
Incredible. Is it useful to you now? Do you ever have any use from any of it?
I do. I do. I'm a baker now. I don't sell. I just bake.
You bake for a living?
Yeah.
What do
Yeah,
you
that's my
bake?
profession. A lot of sourdough stuff like sourdough breads, croissants, baguettes, cinnamon rolls,
At home or at
quiche.
a bakery?
I work in a small restaurant. I'm the baker there. Yeah,
Did you
that's what I
get
did.
credentialed, or it's just your skill?
I
Like,
have
did you go to?
credentials. I went to
I,
trade school when I was in New York. Yeah,
oh my goodness! I want to be
yeah.
your friend.
Okay, I'll send you some of my sourdough starter.
Oh, I can't bake. I can only be friends with people who bake.
Okay, okay.
You can send me the actual bread.
Yeah, I'll mail it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So yeah, so we were trained very thoroughly as far as how to handle people. We were trained to handle people that might give us objections. We were trained if somebody did want to listen to us, how we would go back, how we would develop that into, instead of just meeting, at the door every 5 minutes. How do we develop that to a more in-depth Bible study that might take a half hour, an hour?
I
Okay, then
see.
at what point do you start inviting the person to the Kingdom Hall?
I want to go back to getting a sense of
Mhm.
your childhood a little better. How old were you when you went to Colorado?
I moved to Colorado when I was 20. I would say my formative years were spent in Buffalo. So I would say it might kind of sound like I'm avoiding the question, but I'm being very honest. Most of the memories people have growing up is that they didn't get to have fun on Saturdays. You would
Mm.
think in terms of, oh, most kids, if you're just a child living in a secular world, oh, you eat cereal and watch cartoons on Saturday. Or you might go and play with your friends, or you might have a sleepover Friday night going into Saturday. Most of my memory is waking up early, getting dressed, going to the Kingdom Hall, figuring out what we're going to preach, getting in a car, and then going out to knock on people's doors. Most kids, I would say, were actually scared of seeing their schoolmates at the door.
You didn't
Most
want
kids
to,
were
you didn't want
absolutely,
one of your class,
that
you
was
went to
like,
public school?
yeah, that was like the biggest fear anybody had. But what happened was the school I went to was on the other side of town. So I
Mm.
wasn't going to see them. That was fine. It was awkward when we would actually work the block that we lived on
Oh,
because here, like
man.
the neighbors might kind of know who you are. They might, okay, they're these quirky Joe's Witnesses. But then it's kind of different when like you knock on their door and you're expected to like preach to them. It's just as a teenager, I remember all the doors is ringing the doorbell and hoping nobody answers.
Uh-huh.
Hoping nobody answers. But then there was always the one person in the group that would just kind of knock on the door until somebody answered, and you would always hope to not be with that person. It's like you
Wow.
kind of ring the doorbell and hope the doorbell doesn't ring. If they didn't have a doorbell, you knock on the doorbell, wouldn't want to knock too hard. There were times you can literally see people hiding. Like if there were, you would go on this Saturday morning, people might be watching TV or sports or whatever, and like the doorbell rings, and you kind of see them scatter, and you can see people hiding behind the couch, just hiding behind the wall.
How did that make you feel?
But to me, it's like, I'm not going to hurt you. I'm not going to, maybe you don't necessarily want to hear what I have to say, but I'm not there to do anything bad. But no, there were some witnesses who would be very aggressive and kind of wouldn't take no for an answer. So in my mind, like if somebody sees that, they're not going to want to talk to the next person that comes to the door.
Yeah. It's very bad
So I,
sales tactic.
I would be very sensitive to the idea that people don't want me there. It would be funny because sometimes you could always sense there's this designated person in the house that was like had to answer, and you could tell they did not want to answer. You give your presentation, they would decline, and you would just go your way. I remember, I remember one house where the person hid behind the curtain. I'm like, I can see you.
Was there anyone you ended up having like outside of the faith, like a great experience, like somewhere where someone you fancied lived and you would knock on the door or something like that?
But no, not really. Like I said, it was very insular. It's a very insular existence. I would watch your programs. If you grow up in I would say like a Hasidic community, or like where you grew up, it's very visible
Yeah.
that the people are separate. It's very, very clear that, okay, where they live is in a specific area. It's very clear that people dress a certain way. It's very clear the customs, the holidays. So you can see visibly with some groups that people are very closed in. Well,
Yeah.
with Jehovah's Witnesses, and what was very hard for me is you grew up with the fear of the outside world. The word they would call people who were not witnesses was worldly. And what worldly meant in that context is that you were an outsider. Jeff, okay, what you have is the truth. What you have is the true thing that's going to save everybody. If you get too close to these people who don't believe what you do, they're going to say something that's going to drag you out of it. So, especially growing up, you're scared. But within the culture, there's always this thing where there's this division where you're not them. like, be careful. You're always aware that this person that you have who might be what they would call like, oh, a so-called friend who's not a witness, that friendship's only going to go so far. And what's interesting is the person who's not the witness, the secular person, they may never be aware of that dynamic in subtle ways. Like you're really not going to go and hang out with people after work. You go to work, you're not going to go out to like the company party. You're not going to go out for drinks with the group. When I was growing up, I think the expectations was higher. You wouldn't really even go out to lunch with your coworkers. You just as
Mm.
soon sit at a cubicle on your own before you associate with these people and get too close to them.
Mm.
So there was always that sense. Jehovah's Witness kids, like, they're kind of famous. Like, okay, if there's a birthday party in class, they might have to stand outside the class
Yeah.
because they don't celebrate birthdays, or go to the office or whatever. If there's like a school party, you're not going to go. Some kids would, but deep in the group, you weren't supposed to do that. If you did that, you were more of like an outlier. You weren't really fully in like you were supposed to be. So
Mm.
if there were people that I met, people that I knew, say there was this person in the neighborhood and it was my turn to go preaching and I end up at their door. Well, we can get along, but in the context that I'm seeing you at the door and I'm out preaching, the whole idea is that I'm going to try to start a Bible study with you. So it was a very, very us versus them mentality growing up. And you don't really see it from the outside, but when you're in, it's very, very much there.
I see very few parallels to the Hasidic community from what I'm hearing about Jehovah's Witness, because growing up in the Hasidic community, while you're very insular, you only are with your own kind and you don't have to convince anyone and you don't have to be the other. For me, my experience was so completely different. It was
Hmm.
being only with the same people as myself and having almost no sense of the insularity, whereas this constant contact you had with the other, both as someone who wasn't allowed to be contaminated by the other, but also someone who had to sell to the other, created such a distinct experience of isolation, especially for someone like you
Hmm.
who seems to be naturally very adept with people, empathetic, and connecting with people. That constant contact without being allowed to form real relationships seems to me very different than my childhood, for instance, which all the relationships were people just like me. The only thing is, all the people outside of our world almost didn't exist. The one big similarity is when you make the transition, you might definitely find a lot of people that you thought were friends are no longer friends. Like there's a sense of being excluded. But even then, I think it comes from a different place, more like confusion at having exited the vortex, if you will. Less, there isn't that sense of a zeal in the world I come from that people who are constantly preaching their religion have, which I think is different.
Well, I'll tell you, like, there's really not much zeal to preaching. It's
No?
necessary. It's
Uh-huh.
necessary.
Interesting.
And they're transitioning away from going out so much now. Like, they kind of gotten away from that. There's a much more casual approach to preaching. For example, when I was growing up, we would go to people's doors, like on people's property, and share them our ideas. Like, it was invasive. To me, it felt very invasive. But nowadays, if there's areas where they have like little book carts set up, and
Yeah.
oh, yeah, but what, like, I go by and I see them and they're like looking at their phones, or they're talking to each other, and they're not really engaging with people. They're just kind of standing there.
That's
Like,
so funny. They're phoning
when
in
I
their
was growing,
preaching.
yeah, when I was growing up, that was unthinkable. You would never do that. Never.
Oh my
You had
goodness.
to,
The hardcore is getting softcore. They're losing their
yeah. Um,
funny.
but I will say what's interesting, what you did bring up is when you do start putting things together and maybe start to question the belief system, it's a terrifying experience. It's absolutely terrifying because you know, I for the first 40 years of my life, if I'm not going to the meetings, if I'm not one of Jehovah's Witnesses, I'm going to get destroyed. So maybe I get to a point where that's no longer what I believe, or maybe I do believe it, but there's certain aspects of the culture, there's certain aspects of the group that I just can't agree with. But then I leave. So this hope I have, this thing I have, to me is just the absolute truth, suddenly isn't true anymore. So what do I have after that? Do I still believe I'm going to be destroyed? So one of the hardest things I dealt with was, now I have to have an idea of what mortality is. because my
Mm,
entire life I had an idea there's a hope that I'm never going to die. There's
yeah.
a hope that if I die, then I'm going to be resurrected and it's going to be like nothing happened. So what happens when I leave a group that believes that? What do I have?
What happened that you went to Colorado?
My stepmother's family's from Colorado. My parents got to a point where there was nothing left in Buffalo, so they just went there for opportunity. My brother and we ended up moving with them.
I
So
see.
I ended up going to Colorado, and I got married, I think, within a year of when I moved there. So I was married at 21.
How did you meet her?
The first time I met her, her family was invited over to my family, just like a two family dinners. And that's the first time I met her. It's funny because after that, we just kept bumping into each other, started talking, started chatting. Then that turned into dating, that turned into getting engaged,
She
that
was
turned into
also of the
marriage.
faith.
Oh, she would have had to have been. She absolutely was.
Did you know about sex and romance by then?
Kind of, I would have learned it in school, but the expectation of morality within Jehovah's Witnesses is quite restricted. Like, there's no sex with outside of marriage. My dad might have sat down and had like the talk with me, but much more than that, it didn't go beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
And growing up, what I experienced, it was like that for most kids. So a lot of kids, when they get to those years, they end up getting in trouble, like finding somebody to go out and explore with, if you will.
Mm,
But the thing is, what would happen is, it's common for people to be baptized as 13, 14 years old. So that you get to 15, 16, 17, and you really don't understand your own sexual feelings because you're not taught that in the group in any meaningful way. So then you end up exploring, you end up doing some things that they don't approve of. And then at 16, 17 years old, you end up getting shunned because of it.
mm. You had been a good kid throughout your teenage years?
I was
Good.
I was one of the good ones growing up. Yeah,
Got it.
yeah.
Got it.
um, as Jehovah's Witnesses, they take any kind of relationship with the opposite sex seriously. If you do meet somebody, like the expectation in the congregation is, oh, you met this young woman. Oh, you two are talking. Oh, you two are talking, so maybe you might end up dating. And then you end up dating, and it's like, oh, well, why are we dating? The only reason you date is with the view to marriage. So if we're dating, that means the next step is to get engaged. And engagement is taken as seriously as marriage. Like if you're
Mm,
going to break off an engagement, that's going to be like the congregation scandal. So
mm,
you meet somebody, you date them, you get engaged, and then before you know it, okay, here's the wedding. Okay, we're married. But what happened with me, it was what happened. Like I was married 15 years. As we got older, as we started experiencing problems, as we developed as to adults or older people, is it just didn't work. Like it didn't work. I remember one time we were having our problems, my wife and we decide, okay, we have to talk to the elders about this. So we meet with the elders, talk to them. And after we leave, we're looking at each other like, what was that about?
mm.
Like they offered us no help. There was no practical help. There was no path forward. It's like, okay, here's a scripture that you've probably read 300,000 times your entire life. But I'll read it to you now, and that's going to be the help you need. Okay, go on your way. We'll pray for you. But looking back, like the only foundation that we really had being married was that we were both Jehovah's Witnesses. And one of the things that really started having me ponder was when my marriage fell apart. And what they say a lot of times is like if you leave a certain group, like a high control group, for example, it's sometimes you go through something that kind of rocks you, that shakes you, that really has you look at something. And in my case, it was my breakup. And the reason was because within Jehovah's Witnesses, the only real grounds you have to get any kind of what they call scriptural or approved divorce is adultery.
Mhm.
And there was none of that in my relationship. Like we weren't cheating on each other. There was no abuse. It just didn't work. It didn't work. So what happened when I was living in New York City when we broke up, I had moved back to Colorado to kind of put things back together. So I go there. My wife, she was from Colorado.
Did you guys have kids?
No, no kids.
No kid.
No, I wish I could have had a little girl, but no kids.
I feel you. But was it not encouraged by the church to have children?
It's kind of there was so much focus in the belief system of paradise of the future. There's so much focus on the world ending. So why are you going to put your energy into having kids in this world when this world's going to end and you can have them in the new one when they're perfect?
I
So it
see.
was one of those things where people had kids, but there was, I would say, the culture kind of skewed toward if you don't have kids, it's perfectly fine. But if you
Mm.
have kids, I mean, we'll take them. We'll get them baptized when they grow up.
Go on. So you went back to Colorado where she was from.
So I went back to Colorado. I go there as like the complete outsider. So people are like, "Oh, where's your wife?" "Oh, we separated. We're not together." If there was adultery, say I were the person who was cheated on, and I go back there, that's something that they understand within the construct. That's something they understand within the culture, within the religion. So okay, we'll be there for him. We'll help him. Well, I go back there, and it's like, as far as they're concerned, I might have been legally divorced, but scripturally, I wasn't divorced. So I'm still tied to her, but I'm not. We're not together. So in that sense, what do we do with them? And it's not that they were hostile; they just didn't know what to do.
When did you actually make the decision to break with the faith?
So I tell people I was questioning and kind of going through the whole process for probably a good 8 years. I actually decided to leave like permanently. It would have been about 5 years ago. It was during COVID. COVID happens, the meetings start going to Zoom, so no longer in public. Reverse a little bit. I remember when I'm starting to question it, I remember specifically sitting in the Kingdom Hall, and they would do certain points where they would sing songs. And there were a few songs where I'm like looking at the words, and I'm like, they're telling me what to feel. Like
Mm.
they're having me say these words and put it back in my head. I'm looking at an audience and I'm looking at people just kind of taking it all in. And I kid you not, this might sound like an exaggeration, but to me, and I'm like a bit of like a history buff and like I love cultures, it looked like something that I would see in North Korea,
Hmm.
where you see these people just kind of looking all in one direction, doing the same thing. And there's this weird thing where it's like you don't know if that's sincerely what they feel or if they're performing it because they better. That we go to Zoom meeting and I see these meetings because I'm not in the physical space, because I'm not in the direct environment. I'm able to sit back and look. And the way the meetings went to me, I'm like, this is completely performative. So I was able to like have a space back and just kind of observe instead of be in it. And that really started bothering me. From there, I ended up moving to New Mexico. And at that point, I was still doing some meetings on Zoom, but I forget exactly what it was. When I was looking for an apartment in New Mexico, I go and meet this guy and I'm having a secular conversation with him about like politics and society and whatever. And then before I leave, I said, well, I'll need some time to myself because I'm one of Jehovah's Witnesses. And this guy's like, what? Like, you can't be a witness. You can't be one of them because we just had this conversation and I know you're not supposed to have this conversation. Well, it turns out his father was an elder in the Kingdom Hall. He stopped going when he was a child. His mother used to be one and she left. So he was very familiar. As I'm leaving, he pauses and he wants to say something and he says, I'm not going to say it. I said, we talked this long, just tell me. He was very hesitant. He said, you don't realize it yet, but you already left. I walk out of that house and walk to my car and I'm scared to death because I know he's right. Like I
Mm.
know he's right. A couple weeks after that, I just decided to listen to very specific, explicit ex Jehovah's Witness information because I'm like, I have to find out. And within 48 hours of me looking at what former witnesses had to say, I said, I can't do this anymore. I can't.
Wow.
So I stopped going. And at that point, it's like, I don't know what I'm going to believe, but I know that there's something very wrong with the people that are telling me everything I knew.
Well, have you been able to rebuild a life since then, like to find meaning and your center?
Yeah, it's very, very difficult. Like I said, one of the things I have to come to the idea with is I have to understand that I'm going to have an end at some point. I don't know what's going to happen after, but Jeff right now is going to. Um, Also, like the culture is very so closed in. So it's like, okay, do I want to celebrate birthdays now? I can if I want to. If I do, what does it look like? If I want to go to a
Have you?
church without having, yeah, yeah.
Good for you.
Um, but the thing is, like, I have the freedom to decide whether I want to or not. If I want to go to engage in certain holidays, I can if I want to. I don't have to. There's certain things as far as entertainment, movies that would be completely shut down, shut off to a Jehovah's Witness. But I can look at certain movies and think critically about them. I can read
Mm.
certain books now. I can think about them. I can ask people questions. I can be challenged. There's things I don't have the answer to, and it feels great. Like I mean, there's plenty of things I don't know what's going to happen with this or that or whatever. It's for me to learn, but I don't have to have a concrete, definite answer. But what I had to learn is I like being challenged. Like I like people telling me that what I'm learning or what I think there's a different way to look at it. Somebody can say, Jeff, okay, this isn't quite right from my point of view. Here's why. It's not that I'm upset with people when they do that, but it's really more a point of learning how to process that. And I'm still going through it, but I
Yeah.
enjoy it. I enjoy it.
Yeah, I get that. I very much get that. Personally, I enjoy not knowing all the answers. I enjoy living in a world with questions. Thank you so much, Jeff, for sharing so much. I really appreciate you sharing all of that.